It is common for law firms to pursue short-term growth without setting clear goals or performance metrics. Addressing this can be transformational in improving partner performance. In this conversation, Lexington's partners Moray, McLaren and Moray, Cruz, Taboada unlock this key issue.
As part of our videocast series, I'm in London talking to Moray, Cruz, Taboada.
Hi Moray, how are you?
The majority of your work with law firms around the world is on the intersection between strategy and remuneration. I guess we're calling that performance, in particular partner performance. But what do you think is a current problem that you're seeing with law firms and their partner performance?
Performance is no doubt the way that law firms establish their remuneration system at the same time as their career development. The issue is that now that they have become more sophisticated at identifying that performance and their expectations, there is some underperformance, and the challenge is what to do.
So we've been helping firms look at contribution, understanding contribution, and I guess if you define that, the output is understanding good performance, and as a result, bad performance. And we're talking about what firms do to address that underperformance.
Exactly. And the underperformance will be within scope that in many law firms might build it through business plans, and some might have KPIs or key performance indicators. But we want through this podcast to focus on elements that could help lawyers navigate through their business plan in order to increase their performance, but mostly to make those business plans implementable.
And are there any particular areas where we're seeing this misfiring, any particular stages?
I think no doubt that, from senior to partnership and junior partners are those struggling the most.
Okay.
So we will be looking from the big picture to the small detail. So from aspiration into strategy, then we focus on goal setting, objectives, and then the steps required to make it happen.
Okay, so now we know that what performance is, what are we going to do about underperformance, and in particular the step from the senior associate into those early years as partner. And let's start with aspiration, no? Because you and I work a lot with these young partner groups. Are we saying that aspiration piece, once they become partner, is a little bit more complicated? What is important to them and what needs to happen next when they're a young partner?
Yeah, exactly. It's like winning a gold medal.
Yeah.
So they make you partner and then there you are. And you've worked very hard and you think that you have the abilities and the capabilities to get there, but then how do we make it sustainable? And making it sustainable is a way to looking at all the elements and getting a reason why you're doing what you're doing. So the aspiration part, many times we forget because we think that being a partner is your main goal, the thing that you've always wanted. But then at different stages in your career, you might find that you're looking for different aspirations, like you have different ambitions. So it could be that to begin with is which law firm you want to get in. Then as you grow older, then you focus on, do I want to be a partner or not? It could be that some people enjoy the complexity of certain work, so they want to get to deals or matters that could make them satisfied. So the aspiration is, what is that you enjoy the most, that could make you happier and could make you more satisfied?
So when we talk about performance, law firms we work with, they often think about performance in one or two metrics. One is billable hours and the other is profitability. Yeah. But you've already talked about an untangible, which is aspiration. So how can partners understand their aspiration? How can they kind of form some uniform firm aspiration?
Yeah. So the individual aspiration is key because your time invested and this type of profession, it requires that why. Then is understanding what are you good at. So you mix the why, what makes you happy, with what are you good at. And then you have to make sure that this makes sense with the market, so it's going to get some return. It could be that, there is a practice area that you enjoy very much, but really there's no market for it. So you need to then reconsider whether the opportunities within that law firm are not going to help you for you to develop that specific aspiration.
Yeah.
So it is crucial, one, to understand what you're looking for, as for the big picture, but then see how does that match with the firm that you are working in.
And do you think it's fair to say these young partners need to find their passion? Because they're not going to find their passion, they're not going to be very good at it? Or is that just unbelievable to imagine?
Yeah. In many occasions where we've talked about passion, people say that's too much.
Yeah.
You know, is it passion? Or is it something that gives me satisfaction, that I'm comfortable with, that is what I know I can do really well?
Yeah.
I remember with a group of women lawyers that we were working on aspirations, and one of them said, my aspiration is to help people meet their dreams. I thought that was quite a big aspiration to have, and it's generous because it's for somebody else.
Yeah.
But that gave her satisfaction. How do you translate that in the world of lawyers?
Yeah.
Well, she worked in venture capital, so she worked with startups, and she worked with M&A.
Yeah.
And that type of work gave her the impression that she was contributing in somebody's dream.
Yeah.
So I think everybody can find in their environment something that really makes them happy.
And I think, talking in very practical terms, whenever we work on partners with their plans, and we'll come to planning stage in a minute, they say they don't have time.
Yes.
And they say they end up doing this on Saturday morning or Sunday morning. So if it doesn't give you meaning,
Yes.
if you don't at least enjoy doing it, it's
Yes.
going to be even harder, that Saturday morning extra that you have to do around building client relationships, around developing your profile.
Exactly. Yes. So it's almost understanding what's your inner motivation,
Okay.
because that will be your main driver. Once you have this inner motivation, then the question is, how do I transform that into strategy? So imagine that you're in the middle of the desert, and then you don't know which direction to turn to reach to a village or reach to water. And you might have a place to go, but you don't know how to get there. So the strategy is like your compass, but still it just identifies within 3 to 5 years what are the different stops
Yeah.
that you need to reach in order to get there.
So that's interesting. So I think in my work with law firms, I've focused a lot on what are the external opportunities, and I've spoken to lawyers about what's in the client minds, what's the external opportunities. I like what you're saying about the inner motivation, because unless we're going to match someone's inner motivation with that external opportunity, let's be honest, it's never going to happen.
Exactly. So, and then if you think, some people enjoy very much, let's say, international work, and they might have a capacity to do business in Asia,
Yeah.
but they're in a law firm that is particularly local. So they might think that, that work in Asia might be really complex. So with strategy, you can focus on your practice area, you can focus on your type of clients, on your sectors, or on your geographies. If in this case, the geographies will not give you your way out to reach to your ambition, it could be that you focus on the clients or sectors that come locally, that can give you, that element that for you is important in order to build your career and develop in areas that really satisfy you. So it's a point of structure with being creative on that environment that you're in.
And I'm just being devil's advocate. So you come to a training program, you listen to this recording. This is about finding meaning in what I do, because it's going to be, I have to focus a lot on it. I have to set priorities. And if I don't do that, I might not be successful.
Yeah.
And then what if you get the young partner saying, I don't really enjoy what I'm doing? I mean, what's the consequence of that?
If you don't enjoy what you're doing, you might not survive on the legal profession. So I think that in any profession, there is an element of finding what's the angle that really you enjoy. So if the environment that you're working in, it doesn't give you the opportunities that you require, or it doesn't help you to develop your mastery, so you cannot dedicate to these elements that you want to develop, and you don't understand the why of your tasks, the why of what you're doing, that where is this taking you, you might easily give up and leave. So the legal profession is a profession that there is a lot of rotation in general terms. So that's why these elements of just focusing on the inner aspirations, on your own strategy, and looking for those elements that satisfy you is really important. But at different stages, you might require to make different levels of investment. So the return is not direct. That's why the plan is important. So I might be not enjoying myself very much the first 3 years, but understanding that by year 4, there'll be a turning point.
So this is interesting. We do work in a business where people think about yearly targets, and they might be financial KPIs, and that may or may not be the right KPI to have, but they are done on a year-by-year basis.
Exactly. So we're talking about aspiration, then we talk about strategy. So within strategy, you take some of the elements and try to position them to give you the roadmap. But then you're being evaluated yearly. So those are your goals, and it's what we call goal setting. On the goal setting aspect, some law firms will simply reward you based on billable hours or based on financials.
Okay, so we're talking about objective setting. I mean, it sounds very, very straightforward. I mean, what do you see that works and what do you see that doesn't work?
Yes. So once you've established your roadmap, the question is how to get there. So the objectives, they're like milestones. So it is important that along the way, we establish some achievable objectives that in many cases, the law firms evaluate year after year. So some have financial metrics, some have non-financial metrics. Could be your relationship with your team, or if you're able to develop your team. Could be anything to do with clients, building clients, retaining clients, service delivery. It could be about optimizing resources. So different law firms look at it in different ways. The question is, how do you align your aspiration strategy to objectives and make sure that those objectives are tangible and are achievable.
And is it a top-down approach where this comes from the top of the firm to the practice areas and the sectors and down, or is it a bottom-up approach that works best?
It depends very much on the law firms, in the sense that if the law firms, some of them might present you with those indicators and they might tell you what they expect from you very clearly. But in projects, we tend to see that there is not much clarity of exactly what are the objectives that you require. It's only one outcome that they look for. So it's a bit like, imagine that you're a football player and then you had an injury. So still your trainer and the expectation could be for you to score goals or to perform well on the pitch. However, the way to get there might not be the same for you than to other players, because you need to invest in your health.
Yeah.
You need to make sure that you do some training that could help you to strengthen, let's say, your leg or your ankle if you've injured yourself.
Yeah.
So by looking at the goal setting, the first thing that law firms need to do is, what are my strengths and my weaknesses? So I might be great at billing hours or working on matters, but could I do better on client relationship, retaining or developing clients? Am I good enough with my team? Am I supervising them? Am I giving them enough for them to develop? So that is when you have to combine what are the aspects that the law firm is rewarding you for, and try to get clarity on that. And what are those elements that you need in order to strengthen, your possibilities in order to achieve your aspirations?
I think it's a very good point. So this is frustration, as you said, which is the firm saying these are the objectives are very clear and they're financial, profitability and billable hours. And the individual saying, well, as you said, it's like the school report.
Yes.
Where the headmaster, you go to the headmaster and the headmaster says, just try harder.
Yeah.
But it's how
Yeah.
and what. And if the objective from the leadership team is bill more hours at higher profitability.
Yes.
What does that
mean?
you know, and we work with these people that say, we know, we see the financial metric, but we just don't know how to achieve it.
Yes. And if you add to that, that not every law firm is the same, and there is from lawyers that we work with that sense of, loneliness. So you could be working in a law firm that, that it's basically work on silos, so that there is not potential to collaborate because everyone works in their own departments. You might work in other law firms that they're more structured or they're much more strategic. So it depends on the environment that you work, you need to find your own allies.
Yeah.
Those groups that will help you to get there.
Okay, so we're talking about the success stories of objective setting. What have you seen that are the worst stories, if you don't mind sharing some? And what have you seen in terms of what works for objective setting?
The biggest clarity on objective setting ideally comes from the top, identifying the indicators so that when any lawyer tries to plan, that they know that the effort that they're making will be considered or rewarded by the leadership in the firm.
Okay.
We work with balanced scorecards, and that has helped in order for people to develop their objectives because they have clear indicators that establish, what is expected from them at different stages. What it doesn't work well, from what we see, is when they say you have to grow your practice by 15%.
Yeah.
Which, to be honest, and I don't know if you agree with me, but it tends to be quite general that firms do that.
Okay, so we've talked about objectives, and then how do people move from the objective setting into the implementation stage?
Yeah. So it's interesting because once you understand your aspiration, your strategy, and you've set up some objectives, it might seem simple. Just do it, right? So what's the problem? But here is where we find the resistance. So changing, it's always an issue. And as we said at the very beginning, we are with a group of lawyers that very much overwhelmed for the amount of work that they have.
Yeah.
One of the key issues that we normally put on the table is that by understanding all of that flow that we talked from the big picture to the detail, you start separating what is important from what is urgent. So it will be important to you for sure, and you should make it important for the environment that you work with because that's how you'll be rewarded. So generally, many lawyers, they're firefighters. So they just every day doing the work as it comes. But what we realize is that you don't grow as a professional if you don't invest in the things that matter. So we move from objectives into implementation by looking at the small steps required. And what we work on is very much on the 1% rule. So the 1% rule, what it indicates is that by doing very small changes in your routine, identify changes that you are aware that could make it better, you get an exponential change. For instance, if you imagine and just visualize an ice cube and you start changing the temperature very slowly, and as the temperature goes up, the ice cube internally will start transforming, changing, but it's not obvious. And it's only after it gets to, +0 that the ice cube will start melting. So that is the exponential change. Now, exponential change is very small steps that you take that it might take a while for you to perceive that change. But when it does, you've transformed and it's sustainable.
So we're going from aspiration to strategy to objective setting. I think we're talking about changing habits here, aren't we?
Exactly. So sometimes we want to make a jump from good to great, but maybe we need to go from good to better to great, and we'll get there. It is as important and as simple as some small habits. So elements that will get you there without feeling that you're changing everything at once.
So this is when people have the most incredible strategy at the firm level, and they pass it down to the partners, and the partners set these most incredible objectives.
Yes.
And we wonder why they don't happen. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're not being implemented.
Yeah.
So here we're talking about time and effort.
Yeah.
So in order to create change, it cannot require a huge effort when somebody is already so overwhelmed, but it has to be efficient change. Small elements that could turn into something better. And it has to be understood why. That's why the aspiration at the top is crucial, because then the effort of changing and the resistance could just drop. And then it's easier for somebody to, but you have to be consistent.
So it's a bit like we all know we need to eat healthily. I guess we know we need to go to the gym.
Exactly.
And those that are smokers know they shouldn't be smoking. But what is the change that'll make something that you know you should do into actually something that you implement and something that happens?
Exactly. In many cases, it's even incorporating these elements into your plan will remind you visually of what it is that you're supposed to do. At the beginning, when you establish these small changes, it has to be intentional and conscious, because otherwise we all go into the autopilot. And the autopilot is the easy thing to do. And considering that we are in times of change, one thing that any leadership value is people, professionals that are able to adapt. Now, throughout our careers and as we grow into seniority, there is one element that is obvious, and is that nothing remains the same. So if you don't have the ability to adapt and change, you might not be able to make your dream.
So we're talking about small incremental change in the way we work with our people, in the way we work with our clients. But what's the best that you've seen?
When we're establishing our plans, quite often we go into detail. And imagine if we're looking at client relationships, and then you realize that, you're working with certain clients, but the level of, work that they're passing on to you is decreasing, and you might not understand why. Quite often is this communication with clients that make you better understand what the needs are or what is that they're not satisfied with. So within the relationship with some specific clients, it might be that you want to establish some time every so often to have that conversation or that communication. It could be that you want to be relevant, and then it's, that you choose to send some information that the client might value to become relevant in their inbox.
Yeah.
So maybe within the law firm, it might be that as you want to specialize in a sector, there is a sector group and you want to take more of the lead and make that effort that required to maybe be the one organizing certain level of meetings or strategizing within those sector meetings. So it's an intention that is small. You might already be going to these meetings, but you might not be taking the lead. You might be more of a follower. So the small changes that will help you transform. So that's what we're talking about. When we talk about business plan, what we're saying is that we cannot only focus on the goal setting and results. We need to look from the big picture of aspiration strategy, which gives you the roadmap into the goal setting, but always with the support of those small steps and habits that you might need to change in order to achieve your plan.
And if someone says to you, this isn't important and it's not valued in my law firm, I'm not rewarded on this, what do you say?
I would say this effort, because it is an effort, you do it for yourself. As a professional, we can all get better. So that will help you to put in writing what your intentions are, and for you to be able to review it at different stages of your professional career and keep growing with it. Because the beauty of that is that you are the master of your plan.
In firms where everyone is far too busy to do this, and often they don't prioritize the planning, I mean, what have you seen in terms of working well?
So we have seen those lawyers that have used the tool well and they've managed to implement the plans, the performance growing exponentially. There is always your next mountain to climb, but as you gain that capacity to just climb through those mountains, it makes it easier.
And in terms of takeaways from this discussion, what is the key to success?
The key to success is to bear in mind that when you have the opportunity to build a business plan, you don't do it because they tell you to do it. You do it for yourself, for your own growth, and to meet your aspiration.
Thank you very much, Mary Cruz. I found this conversation very interesting. What I'm taking away is that this has to come internally from the partner, and if it's not aligned to their own internal aspirations and what they want to achieve, it'll never happen.
Yes, Moray, and committing to small changes, you can actually experience great transformation.